The anime begins when we see a boy wake up in the middle of a stable. We are immediately introduced to him by the name Micho, who is the protagonist of our story. The protagonist mentions that he remembers trying to play an MMORPG game in virtual reality, and right after that he does not know what really happened. At that moment, Michu realizes that he has actually been transported into the video game, since he can clearly see his stats with the appraisal skill. After putting on some shoes in the place, he realizes that he has unlocked the thief skill. In addition, he begins to analyze everything around him. At that moment, we see that he finds a sword called Durandal, not to mention that he also finds other accessories that strengthen him at that moment, since the boy is very confident that he is actually in a game. Michi then decides to leave the stable and hides when he sees two individuals passing by. At that moment, he sees a group of villagers gathered together, and right in front of them some bandits come running. Immediately, the battle between both sides begins, and the villagers start to be defeated, so the protagonist thinks that it could be his opportunity to attack them. Next, the protagonist throws himself at one of the men and with a sword slash cuts through his body. The protagonist thinks that everything is being too realistic and immediately blocks the attack of the other man, but with a thrust he finishes him off. In addition, for a long time, the protagonist ended up bloodily killing all the invading bandits. After checking his stats, he realized that he only leveled up once. Also, the leader of the village named Samara thanked him for helping them. He even invites him to his house to celebrate the victory. But afterwards, Samara tells him that all the things found in the warehouse are his, since they are objects and weapons that the bandits were carrying. So the protagonist inspects a bandana that one of the thieves had and tells him that it is not the same one the men were wearing. So Swara tells him that he will investigate what happened to the real one and asks him to stay and sleep that day. The protagonist goes to rest and thinks that the best thing would be to log out of the game to take a real break, but he tries to bring up the menu to exit the MP God and realizes that he cannot. At that moment, Michu panics and realizes that he has actually been transported inside the video game. He even brings up his panel and realizes that it is the same as in the video game, so it should not be real. But at that moment he remembers that before entering virtual reality, a message appeared on the screen which said that if he decided to enter, there would be no way to return to the real world. And because the protagonist thought it was a joke, he ended up accepting the prompt. At that moment, Samara enters together with a girl who brings him new clothes. The protagonist at that instant reflects and realizes that if he is truly in another world, it means that he killed many real people. Both individuals leave the room, and the protagonist remains reflecting on what just happened, since he knows that possibly in that world the bandits will continue attacking and they will have to defend themselves. Finally, he thinks that if everything is truly real, he must do everything possible to survive. A little later, Samara arrives with the protagonist, and we see that they captured the person who had replaced the thief's bandana, since he had switched them. In addition, the protagonist tells him that this one is the correct one, and we see that the man is actually part of the village, so it seems that Samara is going to punish him for being mischievous. At that moment, the man begins to cast magic, and we see that from his hands comes out a card that identifies his rank. In addition, he is assigned the rank of slave at that instant. The protagonist is surprised to hear this, and Samara tells him that the thieves found in the village are turned into slaves and sold, and half of the price they are paid ends up being given to the victim. Not to mention that the rest is given to the subject's family for having lost a loved one who provided them with income. Misu at that moment believes that everything in this world is quite cruel, since he did not expect such a heavy punishment. Samara then hands over some cards called Intelligent Card, and clearly gives them to the bandits, since some of them were being searched for, and they will be able to give a reward to the protagonist. Finally, Samara tells him that there is a night post in the city of Vale, so he could go there to collect his reward. He also tells him that tomorrow there will be a festival, and it would be useful for the protagonist so he can sell all the loot he obtained. The next day, we see the protagonist traveling in a carriage while thinking that Samara gave him everything he needed, and he regrets what happened to the man. In addition, at that moment, we observe the gigantic city of Vale. Upon arriving, the protagonist thinks that it looks quite cheerful, since the people in the place are very active and hardworking. The man who is with the protagonist tells him that the market opens every 5 days, and thanks to this, people from neighboring cities come to sell and buy items. They soon arrive at the guard post, and we see that the girl who receives him is quite arrogant. After checking the intelligence card, the protagonist realizes that everything is in order, and she gives him his reward. The protagonist immediately leaves, and after walking a bit along the road, the man asks him not to be too observant, since they are passing through some slums and they do not want to attract attention. At that moment, the protagonist gets very excited when he hears that inside the district there are many affectionate girls, and soon they arrive at what seems to be a slave mansion. After entering the place, we meet the owner named Alan. He apologizes for the delays, since he mentions that a labyrinth appeared near the city. He then sits down to negotiate, since the protagonist and the man want to sell someone they had captured as a slave, clearly referring to the man who had stolen the bandana. They soon reach an agreement, and the protagonist gives him half of the payment for the man so that it can be given to the family. After saying goodbye to the old man, Micho thinks that now there is no one in the place that he knows. However, the protagonist's thoughts are interrupted when Alan approaches him again. He asks him to come inside to talk about another matter. After entering, the man knows that the protagonist is partly an adventurer and asks him if he is interested in buying someone. The protagonist becomes nervous when he hears that they are offering him a slave, but despite this, he knows that it is very normal in this world, since they themselves just sold one. Alan even mentions that they also sell affectionate girls. The protagonist imagines the worst at that moment, but he ends up refusing, since clearly the protagonist is a decent man. Soon, a maid arrives to serve them tea, and we are introduced to her by the name Roxson. At that moment, the protagonist notices the girl's great attributes. He even acts like a true pervert when he sees that her attributes even bounce. Alan then realizes that the girl has caught the protagonist's attention. The man mentions that she is a slave and that she is clearly the most beloved in the entire place, so he knows that if that is the case, he could buy her. The protagonist asks if the slaves are completely loyal to their masters. Alan confirms this and mentions that they cannot abandon him at any time unless they inherit a will or even try to escape. But if that happens, they would become bandits, and legally they could be killed in that world. The man also mentions that Roxson belongs to a wolf tribe, since she is a beast girl, not to mention that she is also a warrior who could be very useful in case he wants to go to the labyrinth. Finally, he tells him that she is very polite, among other things, so she could be a very good servant for the protagonist. The man, to tempt the protagonist even more, tells him that they can do many little things and other things, since she has never had any man. Not to mention that in that world, diseases between humans and beast men do not exist. After finishing mentioning all the things he could do with the girl, the protagonist becomes completely mischievous, since he thinks that if he does not buy her, someone else will. So he finally asks for the price, and the man tells him that she costs 600,000 nars. However, he will give him a discount and leave her at the price of 423,000 nars. After a long conversation, they go outside and run into the girl. And the protagonist becomes even more fascinated since he knows that now he cannot refuse to buy her. The man then tells him that he has 5 days to get the money, and after speaking with the girl, the protagonist leaves and thinks that he will do everything possible to get the money. In a change of scene, the protagonist begins to imagine what a world full of waifus his wives would be like, since we can even see that he is in some kind of dream with them. Michu was in the old village where he had clearly appeared from the beginning. The protagonist shows the stable where he had appeared, not to mention that the village is also agricultural. At that moment, they meet a boy and the protagonist ends up giving him his sword, since he was planting and the protagonist thought that it could help him so he could take care of his mother. This is because the boy told him that his father had died. The boy leaves very happy after receiving this gift. On the other hand, the protagonist apologizes to Roxson for having given away the sword she had given him. The girls ask if they know his father, but the protagonist thinks that the name sounds familiar. Back in the present, we see that the protagonist has 33 gold coins, which are equal to 330,000 nars, so after adding other amounts, he is still missing 70,000 nars. At that moment, the protagonist remembers some words from Alan, since he mentioned that monsters in the labyrinth drop items, which adventurers can sell, but in this case he would have to be very lucky to collect money in large amounts. The protagonist then asks if being a bounty hunter and hunting bandits would be the best option, but the man does not recommend this, since it could be very, very dangerous. This is because bandits usually focus on eliminating bounty hunters, so he finally tells him that the best thing would be to go to the labyrinth, even if it takes a little longer. Back in the present, the protagonist thinks that he still has 5 days to collect the money, so possibly he should go to the labyrinth, and at the same time he observes his sword, since it is quite strong and he thinks that there will be people who want to take it from him. A little later, the protagonist goes to the market, since he plans to look for a weapon to disguise his own. Micho arrives at a weapon stall and realizes that there is one that has an empty slot. This means that the protagonist can assign any buff he wants to it. At that moment, the seller arrives and the protagonist asks to buy it, as well as another set of armor he has. A little later, the protagonist goes to look for the Labyrinth and notices a group of adventurers arriving with a teleportation skill called Gade. The protagonist then realizes that they have a mage, and after following them he discovers the entrance to the Labyrinth. After preparing himself, the protagonist finally crosses the door of the Labyrinth. He begins to walk and realizes that his sandals had given him the thief skill. So upon entering the Labyrinth, a class called Explorer was activated. Likewise, the protagonist realizes that he now has an inventory and a skill that allows him to travel back to the beginning. The protagonist tries to leave at that moment, but realizes that he cannot, and wonders what kind of skill he saw in the group of adventurers, so he simply decides to start walking inside. Soon after, he runs into a tree-shaped monster, but with a single cut he eliminates it. At that instant, a second monster appears, and this time he uses a skill that makes his opponent look slow, so without thinking twice he finishes it off. At that moment, the protagonist begins to feel depressed, and believes it is due to the use of magic, so he thinks that his sword partly absorbs mana. Because of this, he tries not to use his magic and instead defeat enemies using his sword. After a couple of hours, the protagonist goes to the Adventurers Guild to sell all the branches he managed to collect. At that moment, he receives a payment of 233 nars, and after returning home, the protagonist looks very desperate, since it does not seem easy to collect enough money to buy the girl. So he goes to sleep and thinks that tomorrow he will spend more hours in the labyrinth collecting items. Early the next morning, we see that the protagonist woke up very early to go to the labyrinth, so he uses a skill which takes him directly to the first floor of the place. After defeating several monsters, we see that he has collected many branches. However, he realizes that if he continues this way, it will take him 700 hours to collect the 70,000 nars he is missing, so he knows that he must go down to other levels of the labyrinth. At that moment, the protagonist notices a small hatch and decides to enter it, since he thought there was a treasure, but it turns out to be a nest of monsters. He defeats several of them, but he gets hit. The protagonist becomes a little nervous and thinks that he must do something or they will end up killing him. After defeating several of them, his magic power decreases a bit, and this causes him to get hit again. The protagonist decides to move to a corner so he can defeat them more easily, and after a long battle, he finally defeats all of them. After collecting all the branches the monsters dropped, the protagonist leaves the place and thinks that it was thanks to his sword, since it has a lifesteal ability that helped him recover, and he believes that it is time to return home. However, just when he was returning, he saw a group of people gathered together. When he arrived at the place, he realized that they had killed a bandit. He thinks that it was possibly revenge, since a group of bandits had previously been bothering a village. But despite this, he does not know exactly what really happened. They only know that several of the bandits' companions were killed, and the protagonist thinks that they must have been the bandits he had clearly defeated, since one of them mentions that the group returned to the village for revenge because of them. Finally, one of them mentions that they cut off his arm, and they know he is a bandit, since the intelligence card does not disappear when they die, so they take his arm to show it at the guard post. After leaving the place, the protagonist thinks that if he is going to risk his life in the labyrinth, it is better to do it with something that brings him closer to Roxson. So he has no other option but to accept and become a bounty hunter, since he knows that in this way he can earn a lot of money quickly. After a few hours, the protagonist thinks that if he decides to hunt bandits, he will not have the opportunity he had in the village, since now he will have to face several bandits at the same time and will not have a distraction like before. So he wonders if he will be able to handle it with his abilities. At that moment, he decides to inspect his skills and realizes that he has unlocked many, including warrior and combat skills. The next day, the protagonist uses his evaluation skill to check if there is a bandit in the market, since this is an advantage that not everyone in this world has. When he does not find any, he remembers the words of the man who brought him to the city, since he had mentioned that they never enter the slums. At that moment, the protagonist moves using his new Gade skill, and upon arriving he realizes that the place clearly smells terrible, not to mention that people are literally dying from hunger and disease. But seeing that there are no bandits in the area, he decides to leave using Gate, since he cannot stand the smell. After a couple of hours, the protagonist thinks that now that he uses his magical abilities, he does not feel like he spends as much mana, since for some reason when he used up his mana before, he would start to feel depressed. But now he feels that there is not as much exhaustion, and he thinks that perhaps it is because he leveled up the time he went to the Labyrinth. After a few hours, the protagonist decided to go out at night and the hostel owner lent him a small lamp. After leaving and analyzing the place, he realized that there were actually no bandits. However, the protagonist entered an area where there are many escorts, since it is a red light district. The protagonist thinks that the place at night is completely different. He begins to walk through the area, but many girls try to seduce him. The protagonist thinks that there is no one more beautiful than his Roxson, and suddenly he notices a man, and after inspecting him realizes that he is a bandit. Michu decides to follow him, and realizes that he reaches the center of the slums where there is a group of bandits. The protagonist thinks that if they are gathered there, it means that it is their guard post. Michu approaches to listen to them and realizes that they are talking about the men he had killed, so he will have to investigate the matter further, but he must hurry since he only has 2 days left to make the money. The protagonist mentions that he has now understood more about how the slums work in that place, since the Red District always has clients watching the women. And right after closing, the bandits begin to come out. Not to mention that they get drunk and form groups that fight over territory. He finally knows that the gangs avoid crossing paths with each other, so he understands that if he manages to eliminate one of them, the other will not interfere. After a while, the protagonist returns to the hostel and is welcomed by the owner named Vale. He invites the protagonist to dinner and believes that at night he goes to the Labyrinth. However, he asks the protagonist what is going on with the bandit issue. At that moment, he tells him that he actually knows what happened, since he has information that recently the leader of one of the groups changed sides, not to mention that the faction he had ended up expelling him. Vale also mentions that the bandit who appeared dead belonged to the faction that won and kept control of the city, since there is a kind of dispute between gangs, and they are partly planning to annihilate the opposing gang and pretend that it was done by the bandits who were expelled from the faction. After a long conversation, the protagonist went to bed, but he becomes very excited as he begins to imagine everything he will do when he has his beloved Roxson. After several hours, the protagonist prepares to hunt the bandits. He approaches one of them and proposes selling him a thief's bandana if he gives him some information. Michu tells him that he wants information about a bandit named Hugo, who was the one the protagonist killed. The man only tells him that he knows Hugo was killed recently, and since the protagonist wants more information, he tells him to wait while he consults someone. The man says that his boss is sleeping, but that he knew Hugo, although they will have to talk later because now is not a good time. However, he asks him to come inside, since the money to buy the bandana is in his room. The bandit also notices that the protagonist is carrying a sword. At that moment, he asks to see the bandana to check if it is real. When the protagonist tried to take it out, the man attacked him, but since the protagonist was much faster, he dodged the attack. At that moment, the bandit confesses that the enemy faction had expelled him and that he tried to attack a village but failed, so they consider Hugo incompetent. We also see that the man takes out a sword that he had taken from the protagonist and tells him that he will keep the bandana since that way he will become much stronger. The protagonist understands that this is the only thing the bandit wants, so he takes it out and places it over a candle flame. When the man sees that it will burn, he moves closer to grab it, but with a single movement, the protagonist stabs him in the back with his real sword, since as we remember, Michu can draw and hide his real sword. After finishing him off, he cuts off his hand to take his intelligence card and moves to another place. In the room there were several bandits, whom he begins to kill one by one, but one of them hears the noise and starts attacking in the dark. The protagonist simply waits and gives him a thrust in the chest. After taking the hands of the bandits, the protagonist looks out the window and sees that there are many bandits outside, so he decides to teleport to the Labyrinth. At that moment, the protagonist feels guilty for having killed several people, since he had never committed such an atrocity before. He thinks that he feels depressed because he used too much magic, so he goes to kill a monster. But after leaving the Labyrinth, after a long while, he continues to feel guilty for what he has done. However, he knows that in that world the laws do not apply to people who kill bandits, since it is legally authorized to kill them, clearly referring to the fact that there are no legal consequences because they are bandits. A little later, the protagonist washes his face in his room and wonders how the hell he will deliver the intelligence cards, since when he arrived in the city, he had already handed in several cards, and he knows that if he turns them all in, they might discover that he is a bounty hunter. In the end, he thinks that no matter what happens, since he hopes to finally buy Roxson, the next day we see that it is finally the deadline to buy the girl. The protagonist arrives at the guard post, but he becomes nervous and does not know what to do to hand over the cards. He thinks that maybe he should use some kind of mask or something that would prevent people from recognizing his real face, but he suddenly sees one of the knights he met for the first time. So the protagonist casually calls him over and tells him that some bandits who picked a fight with him were looking for trouble and clearly ended up very badly. The man checks the protagonist's card and, seeing that everything is in order, takes the bandit's cards and tells him to wait while he verifies that everything is correct. The protagonist relaxes a little at that moment, and after several minutes the guard comes out and tells him that they were indeed bandits. In addition, since two of them had bounties, they give the protagonist a bag of money. The protagonist leaves, and after checking the coins in an alley, he feels happy knowing that he now has enough money to buy the girl. After a while, the protagonist goes to Alan and gives him the money for the girl. Alan, very proud, tells him that he knew the protagonist would achieve it. Then the man takes the money and says that he will bring the girl. After a few minutes, the girl arrives and does not look very happy. She also tells him that she needs to apologize to him. The protagonist is very confused, since he thinks that maybe he was scammed. The girl confesses that she knew he would come for her. However, there was one moment when she doubted that he would not come in the end, so she begs him to forgive her, since the girl is very humble and noble. The protagonist tells her that it is fine and that he is happy to have her by his side now. The girl immediately stands next to the protagonist, and Alan thinks that they should celebrate the contract. The man then asks him to show his intelligence card in order to transfer the girl. The protagonist reflects that for a moment he thought about not continuing, but because of how beautiful the girl is, he could not wait even one more day. After reviewing each of their intelligence cards, we see that the girl now appears as the protagonist's slave. Likewise, on the girl's card it shows that he is the owner and that he is the protagonist. Finally, Alan congratulates the protagonist on his purchase, and Micho is happy that the girl is finally completely his. Shortly after, the protagonist goes to Vale and tells him that from now on he will need food for two, not to mention that he wants a double bed. Upon arriving at the room, the protagonist realizes that it is much bigger, and he can also notice that the girl is very, very nervous. To break the ice, the protagonist looks at her ears and asks for permission to touch them. He begins to do so and feels that they are very soft. The girl then asks if she should call him master. At that moment, the protagonist gets very excited and ends up accepting. Then he changes the subject and tells her that he comes from a very distant place, so he would appreciate it if she could provide him with information about the general culture of the area. He also reminds the girl that she will have to accompany him to the Labyrinth to fight, since as we remember, she is also a warrior. While the girl puts away her clothes, the protagonist tells her that he had not noticed she was not wearing shoes, so he gives her his, and we see that the equipment in that world adapts to each person. Suddenly, the protagonist hugs the girl from behind, and she calmly accepts it because of her role as a slave. Soon after, they both leave for the market, and the protagonist tells her that they need to look for equipment for her, since he has swords but needs to get her a shield. They go to an armory, and the girl ends up choosing a shield among other things. On the other hand, they go out to look for material for a cloak, and the protagonist tells her that they can take whatever she wants. However, as expected from a girl, she takes a long time choosing each garment. The protagonist thinks that he does not mind waiting all the time in the world, since he cannot stop looking at her beauty. And just then the girl asks the greatest nightmare of every man, since she asks which of the two outfits looks better on her. This makes Michu nervous, since he knows that if he chooses wrong, he will lose her trust. After selecting one of the outfits, the girl accepts it and thinks that it was not such a bad choice. In addition, the protagonist tells her that she can ask for anything she wants, since today is a day to celebrate. This makes the girl shyly tell him that she needs underwear. The protagonist, acting like a pig, begins to imagine the girl in underwear, but at that moment he comes to his senses and tells her that Roxson can buy all of that without any problem. After several hours of buying different materials, the two return home. The protagonist asks her to sit down, but she throws herself onto the floor. This makes the protagonist tell her that he is not that kind of master who will treat her like an animal. So he tells her that from this moment on they will sleep together. In addition, since the protagonist hugs her at that moment, the girl becomes nervous and tells him that she would rather clean the sword. We notice that the girl is very serious when it comes to weapons, since she takes everything very seriously and treats combat with full seriousness. Next, the girl says that she will use dirty clothes to clean the equipment. Likewise, the protagonist tells her that they should go eat something, so the girl begins to change in front of him, and Micho becomes very nervous, as he looks away, but his perverted side wins. After changing, the girl uses her garment and olive oil to polish the swords, since in this way they will look as if they were new. After a couple of hours, we see that Vale brought hot water for both of them. The protagonist takes advantage of this and asks the girl to wash his back, and she agrees without any problem. While the girl rubs his back, the protagonist asks if she has ever used a bathtub. However, she becomes a little sad, since as a slave she only prepares hot water for other people, so she knows that bathtubs are only for rich people. At that moment, the protagonist tells her that it is his turn to scrub her back, and the girl, as if nothing were happening, undresses in front of him. Clearly, this cannot be shown in the anime, but it is clear that the girl becomes nervous at that moment. Likewise, the protagonist notices that the girl has a kind of tail on her back, since at first he thought it was part of her hair while he was rubbing her back. The protagonist, acting very excited, cannot hold back and thinks that he must see her chest, so suddenly he grabs her from behind and begins to play with them. However, he comes to his senses and knows that he is abusing her trust, so he asks if he can clean her tail. The girl accepts, and the protagonist asks if she can move it voluntarily, but she gets into a very compromising position and tells him that it only moves when she is happy, not to mention that she has no control over it. This leaves the protagonist stunned, since he cannot believe that the girl is like this. Soon after, they end up washing each other's hair. But the protagonist ends up seeing too much of her, so he concentrates with all his being to prevent a tragedy from happening. Suddenly, the protagonist takes her hands and the girl becomes completely nervous. She says that she will put on her clothes, but the protagonist tells her the opposite, asking her to undress completely and get into bed with him. From that moment on, it becomes intimate, but it is something that also cannot be shown in this anime. The next day, the girl wakes up and gives the protagonist a kiss, since he had ordered her to give him a kiss every day when she woke up, so he knows that the girl is very obedient. At that moment, the protagonist knows that they must do something different, so he tells the girl that they will go to the Labyrinth. Later, both of them get dressed while the protagonist tells Roxson that he wants to obtain some crystals to enchant his equipment. The girl tells him that they can obtain those crystals in the Labyrinth. However, those jobs can be enchanted by dwarves. But she clarifies that dwarves normally do not take requests from people, and even if they do, they cannot really be trusted, since on many occasions dwarves claim that they fail in fusing enchantments and end up selling the crystals. At that moment, the protagonist thinks that they should find a trustworthy blacksmith. They begin to leave, and the protagonist looks at his girl and is completely amazed. He gives her leather armor, and after she puts it on, he realizes that it fits her very tightly, making her great attributes clearly stand out. So the protagonist thinks that it would be better if she does not use it. After leaving the place, the protagonist uses Gate to transport both of them directly to the Labyrinth. The girl is a little surprised since she does not know what is happening. The protagonist tells her that they are on the first floor of the Labyrinth, but the girl is surprised since not everyone can use Gate. Afterward, the girl informs him that there are monsters very close, since Roxson has the ability of a strong sense of smell. The protagonist is happy to hear this and tells her to inform him every time there is a monster nearby. The girl asks the protagonist for a magic crystal, since in this way she can store the essence of the monsters, as these crystals are the ones that are worth the most, and the protagonist feels disappointed because he did not know anything about this. However, he tells her that he does not have any crystals, so they will buy one later at the Adventurers Guild. Later, both of them head toward the monster, and with a single strike they defeat it. The girl is very amazed and mentions that she expected no less from her dear master. After a long while, they kill other monsters and then return home. The protagonist praises the girl for the good job she did, and she replies that some time ago she was the novice of a team. At that moment, the girl sits on the bed to talk with him, and the protagonist indulges in his strange fetishes, gently touching her ears. The girl tells him that it feels very nice when he touches them, and the protagonist thinks that their texture reminds him of something. He suddenly asks her if they sell mochi nearby, but the girl, not understanding what he is talking about, tells him that on the coast they sell fried fish and other things. The girl changes the topic and asks him if he ever plans to return to his homeland. But the protagonist, not knowing how to return, tells her that he plans to stay. The girl becomes a little worried, since it is normal that if he were ever to leave, the proper thing would be to sell the other person. However, the protagonist tells her that she can be calm, since he plans to stay with her for the rest of his life, not to mention that he wants to make the most of her in order to gain maximum benefit in the Labyrinth. He also informs her that he might recruit other members for the group later. After a while, the protagonist goes to the Adventurers Guild and buys 2 crystals without magic. After returning to Roxson, the girl explains that depending on the amount of magic stored, the crystal changes color. If they defeat 10 monsters, it will turn red. However, if both of them defeat 100 monsters, it will turn purple. The protagonist takes the opportunity to ask if there is any limit, but the girl mentions that she has heard rumors that they turn white after defeating at least 1 million monsters, and that such a crystal could be worth a fortune. However, she makes it clear that normally they are sold after defeating at least 10,000 monsters. After a long while, both of them are in the labyrinth, and Roxson recommends that they go to higher floors since the monsters on this level do not seem to be any kind of challenge for them. She also mentions that people in this world believe that labyrinths are monsters themselves since they use other monsters inside them to attract humans, so they die inside and feed them. Micho asks that if that is the case, how could they destroy a labyrinth? To which the girl replies that they must kill the bosses on each floor. The protagonist thinks that it will be somewhat difficult, but he just needs to find some strategy. Next, both continue defeating several monsters, and the protagonist thinks that he will try to use magic, but since he does not have enough power, he cannot activate it. We also see that the protagonist's crystal has turned red, but the girl tells him that hers is still black. This is because only the person who delivers the final blow to the monster receives the magic in their crystal. At that moment, Michu realizes that he has a skill called accelerated crystallization, which allows him to obtain much more magic when killing monsters. After defeating several of them, his crystal turns completely purple, and Roxson is amazed at how quickly he obtained so much magic in the crystal. Likewise, after opening his menu, the protagonist realizes that there is an option where he can unlock the group configuration. After activating it, he can now see that the girl has all her statistics in her inventory, not to mention that together they can unlock certain shared skills. At that moment, the protagonist asks if there is recovery or healing magic, and the girl tells him that there is, but that priests normally obtain it by defeating monsters with their bare hands. So he asks the girl to give him her sword, and they begin defeating one with their hands so that it can finally be finished off with the protagonist's sword. This shows that their statistics did not increase much, so he decides to lower the level of his sword, and when he tries to cut the monster, he realizes that he cannot. The monster then begins to attack the girl, but we see that she easily dodges each of the attacks. Micho thinks that he must deliver the final blow, so he immediately approaches the monster and defeats it with one strike. However, we see that the monster's magic was added to the girl, so Mishu thinks that he could lower the power of his sword to leave the monster with just one hit remaining, and in that way, finish it with a punch. After trying several times, we see that he manages to find the exact strength needed to leave the monster on the verge of death. Finally, the protagonist manages to land a blow, and we see that he has now unlocked a healing skill, since a scratch on his face is instantly healed. The protagonist also tells her that she now has the monk class, and she is very confused since she already has the warrior class. However, due to the protagonist's group configuration, he can change it as he pleases, so he tells her not to tell anyone this little secret that he can control both of their statistics. Later that night, both return home and praise each other for the good job they did in the labyrinth. At that moment, the protagonist tells her that he will help clean her, and she undresses so he can do so. After finishing, they once again become intimate. The next day, both head back to the labyrinth and find themselves in front of a door. The girl tells him that it is a waiting door since on the other side is the floor boss. The protagonist, very motivated, says that it is time to defeat it and without thinking twice, enters to fight it. As soon as they enter, the girl says that if they are lucky, they might find equipment since the door only opens when no other team is inside. If they were to die inside, their equipment could be taken by someone else. The protagonist prepares himself and thinks that it looks like an ordinary room. However, suddenly in front of him a gigantic tree-shaped monster begins to form. Roxson immediately charges into battle against the monster, and the protagonist thinks that despite her attacks, it does not retreat. He waits for the right moment, and after landing several blows, we see that Micho cuts the monster in two. The protagonist thinks that the girl moves very well in combat and knows that it must be due to a skill from her Beast Warrior class. The girl then picks up a leaf dropped by the monster, and now also gains the Herbalist class, allowing her to use plants to create medicine. The protagonist takes the opportunity to ask how her beast attack skill works. The girl explains that it enhances her attacks, but she cannot use it freely because she must recite a magic spell, and since she does not yet master it well, she prefers to avoid using it. The protagonist also thinks that he usually avoids using spells. Roxson explains that she prefers not to cast spells, since doing so could lower her guard and get her killed. After crossing the second floor, the protagonist asks if they can defeat the first floor boss again, since if she obtained the Herbalist class by taking the leaf, he also wants to obtain that class. The girl replies that they can, and they head back to the boss. Although the protagonist feels confident, he notices that this time the boss tries to use magic. However, thanks to the protagonist's sword, it absorbs the attack. The monster then attacks the protagonist, and the girl protects him, but he finally delivers a thrust to finish it. After taking the leaf, he realizes that he now also has the Herbalist class. Using the leaf, he turns it into small pellets that work as an antidote for poison, and he is shocked to learn that there are monsters that use poison. Later, both go to the Adventurers Guild, since the protagonist prefers to buy several medicines that could help in case of emergency. He also thinks that for some reason his 30% discount skill does not work at the Adventurers Guild, even though it worked when he bought the girl. However, due to a calculation skill used by the guild, there is no way for him to receive a discount. After finishing the purchase, they decide to return to the Labyrinth to explore the second level. Upon arriving, they encounter a tree and a level 2 green caterpillar. After defeating it, the protagonist thinks that now there are two monsters at the same time. The girl explains how it works, and he understands that by multiplying the floor they are on, by 2, there will be extra monsters at once. So when they reach floor 16, 5 monsters will likely appear at the same time. After a while, they find 2 caterpillars and the protagonist defeats one immediately. However, the second wraps him in thread, and just as it is about to attack, he takes advantage and cuts it down. He also thinks that these monsters are quite annoying. After a long time, both return to the city, and while walking, the protagonist thinks that they must be careful if many caterpillars appear, since otherwise they could end up trapped in threads. Suddenly, the protagonist pins the girl against a wall and tells her to discreetly look ahead. Since there is a man hiding, the girl says that the man is looking at the old mansion where she used to live, so she suggests that maybe he is a client. But the protagonist does not believe this, since he examines him and realizes that he is a level 3 thief. Both immediately go to inform Alan. The man thanks them and mentions that he is quite hated because of the type of work he does. Roxson says that the man is a bandit, and Alan asks, "How do you know this?" The protagonist obviously cannot say that he has an evaluation skill, so he excuses himself by saying that he saw him a couple of months ago while collecting the money for Roxson. Alan says that he has a small idea of who it could be. He even mentions that it is related to the protagonist since it is connected to the man Micho had sold the other day. This is because he mentions that just the previous day he had sold him to a person who came accompanied by 2 other men, and he asked him to wait since he had to do some things and would come back for the slave the next day, clearly referring to that very day. Alan also mentions that while one of the men was asking him questions, the other was talking with the bandit. In addition, he finds it very strange that the man had a thief's bandana, so in short, he implies to the protagonist that before he was captured in the village, he already had ties with the bandits. The protagonist asks where the man is, and Alan tells him that he is in one of the rooms at the back, since because they paid him, they asked that he be allowed to move freely around the house, and he agreed. So his room is unlocked, and the protagonist thinks that perhaps they left it that way so he could open the door for the bandits while everyone is asleep. The protagonist tells him that he seems very calm knowing that all of this could happen, but Alan replies that even if a large group tried to attack the mansion in the middle of the city, he has combat slaves, so he would never lose to simple bandits. The protagonist understands his words and asks Roxson to leave, since he has already warned him. However, Roxson looks very sad since she knows that an old woman in the place took care of her. This makes the protagonist change his mind and offer his services as a bodyguard to Alan, telling him that he would not like one of the slaves he sold him to cause problems. Roxson thanks the protagonist for his good heart, and Alan ends up accepting. He also offers him Mylars and all the equipment and intelligence cards of the bandits. The protagonist defeats. Finally, the protagonist accepts. Alan takes them through a secret passage and tells them that no one will see them if they stay there, so they say goodbye and plan to return at night. As they leave, the girl apologizes to the protagonist for mentioning that the man was a bandit. Even so, he tells her not to worry, since in the end they obtained a job, and he only asks her to be careful next time and to tell him if there is something wrong. After a couple of hours, the girl wakes the protagonist with a kiss and tells him that it is time to go. He quickly gets ready and is surprised to see that she is also going. Michu agrees to let her go, but asks her to stay behind him, since he does not want anything to happen to her. They soon arrive at the mansion, and Alan is waiting for them. He takes them to the second floor, and the protagonist notices some very strong men. Finally, Alan tells him that he can wait on the stairs for any movement, since they will inform him if something happens with the bandits. The protagonist agrees without any problem, and they sit and wait for something to happen. After several minutes, Roxson smells that someone has opened the door. Alan asks them to guard the place, since upstairs are the ones who take care of the slaves and they cannot fight. He also adds that he should be careful, since he does not want one of his clients like the protagonist to get hurt. Both move forward, and in the darkness they see the thief running. The protagonist approaches and asks Roxson to stay upstairs to guard the area. While walking toward the place, he thinks that for a long time he has tried to use magic. He realizes that he has a magical exchange ability, but he does not really know how it works. It might exchange his health with that of the enemy, so using it could be costly if he does not know who he is facing. Even so, he activates the ability and rushes forward to stab him. At that moment, the man seems as if he exploded from the blow. The protagonist also falls to the ground due to excessive use of magic. Roxson arrives and becomes worried about him. Alan also arrives and sees the bloody scene of the bandit. The protagonist thinks that they will discover that he killed him, but they believe that the man used a self-destruct sphere, which is an artifact that basically makes someone explode. The protagonist feels relieved that they did not realize he used his magic to kill the bandit. After a long while, Alan thanks them for the help and gives him his payment. As the protagonist heads home with Roxson, he feels terrible since he overused his magic while testing this new ability. Roxson apologizes, feeling that she was not useful in helping him, but the protagonist knows that he is in this condition because of his selfish desire to test his new skill, so he thinks that he must kill monsters to recover his magical power. He immediately uses Gate to go to the Labyrinth, but this makes Micho feel even worse due to using magic. Later, he defeats several monsters and manages to recover. He examines his abilities and realizes that after using Exchange, he can now use magic of the 4 elements. At that moment, the protagonist asks Roxson what kind of spells mages cast. She tells him that there are several, such as spheres and other types of attacks. The protagonist wonders if they cast fire spheres or something like that, since he knows she is referring to offensive magic. He checks his statistics and sees that he can create a fire sphere and also launch small explosive fire attacks. This leaves the girl very astonished, since she remembers that he was just a simple explorer and never thought he could use magic in this way. The protagonist simply tells her that she must keep this secret from anyone. He then defeats one of the monsters, but knows that it is not enough to finish them with a single spell, and understands that as he levels up, he will be able to do so. He also tests other abilities, such as a firewall used as a shield. Although his magical power decreases at that moment, the protagonist thinks that he does not feel as weak and depressed as before. So they head to the second floor, and upon seeing 2 tree monsters, he tries a firestorm skill and defeats them very easily. At that moment, the protagonist became very happy about how useful magic is. He explains that for a long time he was experimenting with the new spells, since he discovered that they are composed of different forms and elements. Just like fire spells, Michu can do the same with other elements. We can even see him using water magic to supply his needs, so he thinks that he wants to stop depending so much on his sword and start using his magic. Clearly with the purpose of protecting his beloved Roxson, and because of the love she has shown him through their intimate moments. After a long while, Micho confesses to the girl that he wants to fight mainly using magic. After defeating a monster, he tells her that he wants to increase his power level. The girl comments that she has heard that mages normally use a staff. Micho thinks she is right, since it is equipment commonly used by mages. However, because there are 4 days left until the market, the girl tells him that they could go to the city called Curatar, since it is not common to find staffs in regular weapon shops. She also adds that the city has a gigantic labyrinth, and thanks to that there are many stores for explorers like them. After a long walk, they arrive at the waiting room of the level 2 boss, and since no one is there, they decide to enter immediately. A giant caterpillar begins to form, so the protagonist uses a fire shield as a distraction, and the girl attacks it. Micho also takes advantage, and by performing a combined attack, they defeat the boss. They then move on to level 3 of the labyrinth, and the girl warns him that she can smell a kobold. The protagonist says he does not know this kind of monster, but without fear he wants to see what they are like. The girl tells him to prepare, and suddenly a small goblin-like creature with a knife appears, a level 3 kobold. The protagonist immediately throws a fireball and defeats it easily. It drops a salt crystal, and the protagonist is disappointed to learn that it is the cheapest item in the guild. Even so, he continues killing many kobolds to obtain a lot of salt. The girl then asks the protagonist if she can know his level, and she is shocked to learn that he is level 20 as an explorer, thanks to his XP increase ability. He asks her to keep it a secret, and they return to the Adventurers Guild. At that moment, they hear a woman requesting adventurers to travel to the royal capital. The protagonist understands that this kind of job exists in this world too, and he finds it interesting. He tells the girl that if it were toward Curatar, he would accept without hesitation. Roxson tells him that they could go, since the royal capital is very close to it. She confesses that one day she had to go to Curatar and passed through the capital. The protagonist says they could go, but the girl replies that it is better to stay since traveling requires paying an extremely large sum. The protagonist understands that she is very mature, so he goes to the woman to use the transporter. He says goodbye to her, and after a gate-like portal opens, he appears in the Adventurers Guild of the royal capital. Once there, the protagonist asks the girl to take him to Curatar. She agrees, and after arriving at a place, the protagonist thinks that he must return to Roxson, since it is revealed that he can use Gate to travel anywhere he has already visited. Now that he has visited Curatar, he can reach it using his own gate. However, after returning to the girl, he feels completely exhausted, since he consumed a large amount of mana. They return home, and after washing each other, they once again become intimate. After a long while, the protagonist thinks that living in an inn does not give them much privacy, so he considers getting a house in the future. The next day, he arrives in the city of Curatar, and the girl guides him into the labyrinth. He notices that they charge an entry fee. However, the girl cleverly tells him that they can simply use Gate to enter, since he only needs to enter once in order to use Gate inside. After a while, the protagonist and Roxanne accidentally enter a hardware store. The girl tells him where the armory is located and also asks if they are looking for a house, but he says that for now they need to go to the armory. After leaving, he thinks that maybe she works in real estate. Roxson comments that rental prices in Curatar are very cheap, ranging from 10,000 to 30,000 nars per year. She even mentions that with 50,000 nars they could rent a very large house. The protagonist, being good at managing money, knows that it would be much cheaper than continuing to pay for the inn. Also, it should not be a problem to rent in such a big city. The girl thinks that they could use magic to live anywhere, but the protagonist refuses, since he does not want people to know that he can use magic. Soon after, they arrive at the armory and see several magic wands and staffs. However, they decide to buy a wand since he is still a beginner and does not want to draw attention. Later, both of them are outside Curatar, looking at a place where they could live. After that, they return to the woman from the hardware store and ask if anyone can live in this city. The girl tells him yes, and that he only needs his intelligence card to be in perfect condition. She also explains that the city is divided into 6 districts. After a long explanation, the protagonist asks if she knows of any house that costs around 40,000 nars per year. The woman thinks for a moment while looking at Roxson, and the protagonist wonders if she knows that she is his slave. However, she simply says that Roxson is a good girl and asks if they want a house near the labyrinth. The protagonist says that it does not matter since he only wants a place to be with his girl. After a while, the woman takes them to a huge house outside Curatar. The protagonist holds Roxson to appear natural and try to get a good discount. They are told that the garden requires a lot of work, and after long negotiations, the woman offers to include the necessary seeds for planting. Then they enter the house, and she begins to show them everything, even the toilet that the previous tenant built. She mentions that he tried to make other renovations involving pipes and a second bathroom, so the protagonist thinks he may have tried to build a shower. Roxson is very happy when she sees how nice the kitchen is. The protagonist goes up to the second floor and notices that, because they are in the same group, he can see her from above. After inspecting the rest of the house, he tests his gate ability. The woman had mentioned that there were protective walls, but he is amazed to see that gate has no limits. After finishing the discussion, they agree to rent the house for 45,000 nars per year. The woman tells them they must return to the city to verify the intelligence card at the guard post. After everything is confirmed to be in order, the protagonist and Roxson sign the contract. They also buy some boxes and kitchen items from the shop where the woman works. After leaving, they are very happy and decide to buy the rest of the things the next day. Soon after, the protagonist arrives at the house using gate, and Roxson is amazed that he can use it despite the magical protective walls. Because of this, he asks her once again to keep it a secret. They then go to the third floor of the Valley Labyrinth, since the protagonist wants to test his new wand. A green caterpillar appears, and after casting several spells, he defeats it completely, feeling very happy with his new weapon. After a few hours, he goes to Vale to rent one last night at the inn. In the room, he realizes that he had slept there since he was saving money to buy the girl, and he remembers all the good moments they shared. Roxson comes to bathe again, and what happened afterward does not need to be mentioned. The next day, both of them are very happy, though they feel sad that they will not return to that place. Roxson is glad that it was the place where he first took her, but she knows she will continue to please him in their new home. After returning the keys to Vale, they thank him for all his service and leave for their new house. The protagonist conjures water so Roxson can clean the house. He then tells her that they will go to the new labyrinth in Curatar. After waiting in a long line, he pays silver coins to the guard. He thinks that the guards are good businessmen. Since they sell labyrinth maps, inside he notices that there are many adventurers, and the structure is very similar to the Valley Labyrinth. He wonders if he will be able to gain anything since there are so many people. Taking advantage of a moment when no one is nearby, he uses gate to return home. When he arrives, Roxson welcomes him, and they act affectionately. Just as they are about to get intimate, they are interrupted by a man delivering furniture they had ordered. After a couple of hours arranging everything, they reach the bedroom exhausted. Seeing Roxson happily moving her tail, he grabs it and asks if no one else will come. When she confirms, he says they should try out their new bed, and he feels happy knowing no one will disturb them in their new home. The next day, Roxson wakes him up. The protagonist admits that his life is full of lust, but he knows he must maintain this lifestyle to stay with someone like Roxson. He then tells her that they should go to the Curatar Labyrinth. They head there, and the protagonist asks why there are so many people on the first level. Roxson explains that since it is very famous, people must pay to enter. Many try to stay as long as possible. The protagonist asks if anyone has ever completely cleared the labyrinth. Roxson says that to this day there are no records of anyone completing it, so no one knows if there is a final boss. The farthest anyone reached was the first emperor, who made it to floor 91. Finally, when it is the protagonist's turn and they face the boss of the first level, they realize that it is a kobold. However, after attacking, they notice that it is quite weak and slow. With a single strike, the protagonist defeats it, and they immediately reach the second level. The protagonist becomes disappointed when he hears that all the monsters there are kobolds, so he decides to return home at that moment. Roxson reminds the protagonist that they need to collect the seeds that the woman who rented them the house had offered. The protagonist decides to accompany her, since he thinks it is a good time for lunch. After a while, they arrive at the hardware store to pick up the promised seeds. The protagonist also thinks that they should buy a tool to till the soil of their garden. Roxson initially refuses, but the protagonist would never allow her to work directly with her hands, so he ends up buying the tool without hesitation. They return home and spend the rest of the day working. First, they till the soil, and the protagonist also builds a kind of fence around the garden. At that moment, Roxson tells him to take off his clothes so she can wash them. The protagonist thinks that he would like to have a bathtub with hot water, right now. Roxson also thinks that they should buy a wash basin for doing laundry. So, being a man who solves problems, the protagonist immediately goes to buy one. The shopkeeper gives him one, and the protagonist notices that he also sells bathtubs. He asks if he can order a much larger one than the one available. The man says yes, but it would have to be made to order. After explaining the size he wants, the protagonist thinks that this way he can bathe together with the beautiful Roxson, so he knows he must buy it at all costs. When he hears that it costs 2,000 nars, he agrees. After a couple of hours, they go to the labyrinth, and after defeating a kobold, they notice that it dropped a kind of flower. Roxson says that it tastes much better than the traditional kind. At that moment, both become hungry and decide to go have dinner. Back home, the protagonist prepares a creamy stew, and since Roxson has never seen it before, she tries it and is completely fascinated. The protagonist notices that she even talks with her mouth full. He also thinks that soon their bathtub will be finished. During the following days, they dedicate themselves to leveling up in the labyrinth, visiting Vale, and doing other activities. Later, they face a goat-shaped boss. The protagonist explains that a long time ago he was afraid to fight, but now that he has Roxson, he feels confident, since she is a true warrior who does not fear combat. This motivates him greatly in battle. Roxson even thinks that the boss is weak, which makes the protagonist wonder if there is any monster she truly fears. Suddenly, just as the protagonist moves in to finish the monster, it makes a sound that causes damage to him. He knows that his priority is to protect Roxson, so while striking the monster several times with his sword, he also heals her at the same time until they finally defeat it. Afterward, both say that they are fine, and Roxson mentions that he froze for a few seconds. The protagonist thinks that the roar makes people fall asleep, allowing the monster to kill them. He believes this is a powerful combat ability, since if it could affect more people, it would be very dangerous. After confirming that Roxson is in perfect condition, he thinks that they should return home. Later, we see the protagonist outside with Roxson waiting for someone. The man arrives with the large bathtub they ordered. After leaving it, he says goodbye, and they carry it inside. Roxson, confused, does not understand what a bathtub is, and the protagonist explains that it is where they will bathe. Using his magic, the protagonist prepares the bathtub, making the water very warm. He admits to himself that he is a pervert who did all this just to bathe with her, and thinks that only someone persistent like him would go to such lengths. It is clear that this is true, since he spent days collecting money just to fulfill this desire. After a long time heating the bath, the protagonist tells her that she will also use the bathtub, and she happily agrees. Soon after, we see the protagonist inside, and the girl arrives in a very provocative manner. He asks her to get in and show him that she managed to make soap with her alchemist class. The protagonist begins to make foam with the soap, and what happens next cannot be shown, since we know that Michu is quite the charmer. After a long time of intimacy, both of them are completely fascinated by the bathtub. The protagonist thinks that he never imagined bathing together with such a beauty. He then remembers that the girl had been injured in combat. Later that night, while she is sleeping, he knows that he cannot continue exposing Roxson to danger. Even though he can use heal, it does not remove the risk that she could die. So he realizes that the only way to keep her safe is to have more members in the group. The next day, they reach level 7 of the labyrinth and defeat a rabbit. After taking its skin, the protagonist tells her that they now have many, and it is thanks to her. They then go to the imperial capital to sell all the skins, planning to sell them at a tailor shop that pays better than the Adventurers Guild. However, when Roxson asks, they are told that they only buy in quantities of 100 or more. So they return to the labyrinth to hunt more. Thanks to Roxson's sense of smell, they find a treasure chest, and since they arrived early, they take advantage of the treasures. After some time, they reach the boss room of the level and encounter a fierce red rabbit. After exchanging several blows, the protagonist defeats it with a single sword strike. Roxson congratulates him, saying he is as amazing as always. The rabbit drops meat, and the protagonist thinks they will enjoy something delicious today. Back home, Roxson tries a recipe using the meat and completely surprises the protagonist. He even thinks about collecting more meat to continue eating like this. After defeating several more, the protagonist arrives at the boss waiting room and realizes they must wait. There, he meets a man who mentions that he wants to save money to have more companions, clearly meaning to buy a slave. He says that he has been stuck on level 7 for about 2 years, and that after defeating the boss, he will finally have enough to buy one. At that moment, the door opens and the man says goodbye to them. This makes the protagonist thoughtful, since 2 years is a very long time for someone. After talking for a while, it is finally their turn. When they enter, the protagonist notices that the boss is already waiting for them, which he thinks has never happened before. He uses his slow magic and defeats the boss with a sword strike. After taking the meat, They see equipment in the distance, which surprises the protagonist. Roxson explains that the boss was waiting because it had defeated the previous group. They also find a black crystal, which the protagonist fuses with his own. He realizes that the man they had just spoken with must have died tragically. Later that night, while they are being intimate, the protagonist cannot stop thinking about the man. He cannot believe that the labyrinth is such a dangerous place. He knows that today it was that explorer, but tomorrow it could be him. So he understands that he must start being much more careful, both for himself and for his girl. Roxson wakes up and, seeing that he is sad, undresses in front of him and tells him that she will do anything to make him happy. The next day, the protagonist wakes up feeling much better. They return to the labyrinth again, and he thinks that if tomorrow is his death, then he must become much stronger. So they begin killing many monsters. After defeating another one, the protagonist checks his inventory and realizes that he has more than 300 skins. So they head to the tailor shop in the imperial capital. The protagonist immediately takes them out, and we see that it is a whole mountain of skins, so the man asks for some time to measure their size and weight. While waiting, both of them look around the place, and the protagonist notices some lingerie and starts acting mischievous, asking the girl what she thinks about it. Roxson likes it, so he ends up buying 2 pieces, and meanwhile the buyer gives him his money. Later, they return home, and the girl happily says that she will wear one of the outfits when they become intimate. However, the protagonist tells her that they must bathe first. Since he tries to heat the water but has little magic left, he asks her to accompany him to the labyrinth to gather some magic and heat the water. They arrive and encounter several monsters. The protagonist gets distracted thinking about seeing the girl, and she is hit by a bull-like monster. After defeating it, he falls to the ground slightly injured, realizing that his carelessness almost cost him dearly. Later, while bathing, the protagonist has a small cut on his finger. The girl worries about him, and he jokingly tells her that he can heal if she licks it. After she does so, he feels happy, and they continue with something that cannot be shown, though it is clear that he feels satisfied. Afterward, he notices that she is wearing the lingerie he bought for her. He is delighted and asks her to turn around, becoming stunned when he sees that she is not wearing anything underneath, as she is adapting to his playful nature. The next day, they are fighting several rabbits. The protagonist uses fireballs and quickly defeats them. He realizes that more monsters are appearing at the same time and knows they must be careful on the next floors. He notices that they defeated 3 rabbits but only obtained 2 skins. Roxson excitedly shows him that they have finally obtained a skill crystal. They return home, and the protagonist cannot stop looking at the crystal. However, he is disappointed to learn that he must find a trustworthy dwarf to perform the enchantment. Roxson comes to have lunch, and he shows her that the crystal has turned yellow. She is shocked, since a few hours ago it was green, but he explains that he fused it with another one. He believes that yellow crystals are worth at least 100,000 nars, so he suggests going to Valet to speak with Alan. Roxson becomes worried, but the protagonist tells her that he wants to leave a will, since after what happened with the explorer, he has been uneasy when going to the labyrinth. He explains that when a master dies, the slave's life also ends. Roxson begs him not to do it and asks him to trust her, saying that she will protect him so that he never dies. Seeing how determined she is, he finally agrees not to make a will. She encourages him, saying that he will accomplish great feats and will not die, though he insists that he does not seek glory. After talking a bit more, the protagonist says that he still plans to go to Vale, since after the last battle he knows they need to increase the members of their group. Roxson agrees, since from the 8th level onward, monsters will appear 4 at a time. The protagonist mentions that if he truly wants to focus on his magic, they will need a 3rd companion, and in his perverted thoughts, the protagonist hopes that the new member will be another girl, so he can do many things with both of them. After a few hours, they arrive at Alan's place, and he is happy to see the protagonist again. Micho goes straight to the point and says that he needs more members for his team, so he has come to buy someone. He even asks if he has any dwarf blacksmiths, but Alan explains that they are very difficult to find. He also mentions that when dwarves are bought, the relationship between master and slave often ends badly, because if the dwarf fails an enchantment, conflicts arise between them. Seeing that it is truly difficult to find one, the protagonist asks about a dwarf warrior. Alan tells him that he has one, but she is not currently in the best condition to fight. Micho asks Roxson for her opinion, and she says that they could at least give the dwarf a chance and meet her. The protagonist agrees. After a while, a door opens, and an elderly woman appears. Roxson is happy since she is the old lady who once took care of her. Then the dwarf appears, and we learn that her name is Sherry. Alan mentions that she is the only dwarf he currently has. The protagonist analyzes her from head to toe and thinks that she looks about the same age as Roxson. Even though she is in a difficult situation, she still looks strong. After introducing herself, we see that Sherry has a very energetic personality. She sadly explains that she was not able to become a blacksmith, but despite that, she is a level 10 explorer. The group sits down to talk, and Sherry mentions that dwarves normally become blacksmiths when they reach level 10. However, since she could not, she thinks she might not be suited for it. The protagonist cannot understand how they can be so close-minded and asks if being told no once is enough to stop trying. Sherry explains that it is because of the Blacksmith Guild, which only accepts level 10 explorers who possess certain other qualities she does not know. Even so, the protagonist believes that there must be something within dwarves that unlocks their blacksmith abilities. After thinking for a few seconds, he considers that she could still be a very good option for their group. Sherry mentions that she was the best fighter in her village, and adds that she will not cause any trouble in the labyrinth. After that, Alan asks her to step outside so the protagonist can think. Micho and Roxson continue talking, and he wonders why Sherry is so eager for him to buy her, since a slave normally would not promote herself so much. Roxson tells him that she could be a very good option, because even though she does not know much about dwarves, Sherry is highly motivated to fight in the labyrinth. The protagonist also thinks it is good that Roxson does not oppose the idea of having another girl in the group. Roxson then says that Sherry's price might be low because of her age. The protagonist is surprised, since when he used appraisal, he saw that she was 16 years old. Roxson explains that dwarves usually have thinner ears when they are somewhat older, which leaves the protagonist thoughtful. Alan returns with the elderly woman, and Roxson steps out to talk with her former caretaker. Meanwhile, the protagonist and Alan continue talking. Alan is direct and tells Micho that Sherry is 16 and has never been with a man, so she is free of any kind of disease and is willing to do anything. The protagonist mentions her ears, and Alan confirms that she is indeed 16 and that her ears are simply like that from birth. So Alan says that the 300,000 NARS price is fair and offers a discount, lowering it to 270,000 NARS. However, the protagonist pretends to hesitate and negotiates further. After several rounds of bargaining, Alan finally agrees to sell her for 197,000 NARS. After paying, the protagonist goes to Roxson and tells her that he bought Sherry. For a brief moment, Roxson hesitates, but she becomes happy when she hears his words. Soon after, Sherry is brought in and is told that she now belongs to the protagonist. The two girls introduce themselves, and Roxson mentions that she is the first slave. Sherry teases her by saying that she looks more like the protagonist's wife. Roxson replies that they will have a good life with him and will lack nothing. Alan then formalizes the contract using the intelligence card. They check it and see that Sherry now appears as his slave as well. Afterward, Alan thanks them and says he hopes to see them again sometime. Sherry joins the protagonist's group, and Micho welcomes her. The protagonist reviews her statistics and confirms that she does not have blacksmith skills, so they will need to find a way for her to unlock them. The three of them begin walking, and Sherry asks Roxson many questions. The protagonist understands that she is curious because he possesses adventurer-like abilities as an explorer. Roxson stops her and says that the protagonist will answer her questions at home. When they use gate, Sherry becomes confused. Roxson tells her to sit down, but Sherry refuses, saying that slaves are not allowed to sit. Roxson explains that the protagonist is not the kind of master who mistreats people. Feeling relieved, Sherry sits and immediately asks the protagonist if he can use multiple abilities. Unable to avoid the question, he confirms that he is an explorer who possesses adventurer skills, but he is not exactly one of them. Sherry mentions that she remembers legendary stories about gods who had multiple abilities like him. The protagonist does not comment on this and changes the subject, asking what weapons she uses in the labyrinth. Sherry replies that her specialty is spears. However, since she will be fighting alongside Roxson, she suggests using a mace instead. The protagonist thinks that since he had to fight barehanded to obtain healing skills, perhaps Sherry could unlock blacksmith abilities by defeating a monster with a mace. Roxson says that she and Sherry will stay on the front lines while the protagonist casts spells. Sherry is shocked to hear that he can use both offensive and defensive magic. He immediately tells her to keep it a secret. After a few hours, the group goes to the market to buy Sherry a mace. She explains that dwarves, despite their small size, possess great strength. At the armory, she chooses one and is completely fascinated by it. Later, they return home, and after a long discussion, they tell Sherry that they will go to the Labyrinth and ask if she wants to join them. Since the food had not yet been served, Sherry ends up accepting. While preparing, the protagonist takes the opportunity to ask her if she knows anything about equipment slots. She says that it has always been considered a legend, since she has heard that if equipment does not have an empty slot, it cannot be combined with a crystal. They also have no way of verifying whether it works. However, the protagonist thinks otherwise, since he possesses the appraisal skill and is likely the only one who can see such details. After talking for a while, the protagonist asks if she knows about the hero class. She happily says yes, explaining that it is known as a legendary class and that the first emperor supposedly had it. So now it is considered a myth. Later, the group arrives at the Labyrinth, and the protagonist wants to show how good he is at fighting. He charges into battle and defeats several monsters, leaving Sherry very impressed. However, she ends up praising only Roxson. Eventually, the protagonist says that his magic power is fully charged, and that they should return home. He uses Gate, and Sherry asks if he can use it outside the Labyrinth. Roxson explains that he can use many types of magic without chanting. The protagonist then reveals that he is level 33 as an explorer. This shocks even Roxson, since the last time she remembered he was level 20. We know this is due to one of his secret abilities. The protagonist invites her to sit and eat, but she hesitates and asks if she is allowed to. Roxson reassures her that with them, she can always sit at the table, and as part of tradition, she must also serve the food. The protagonist serves himself first, then prepares a second portion for one of them. Roxson gives him a sharp look when he tries to give the second plate to Sherry, so he hands it to Roxson instead, making her happy. After tasting the food, he is amazed by its flavor. Sherry asks why they went to the Labyrinth while preparing dinner and the bathtub. Nicho explains that using magic consumes a lot of mana, and that his sword Durandal can absorb magical power. He then changes the topic and asks what kind of racial abilities humans have, since beastmen have warrior abilities and dwarves have blacksmith abilities. Both girls become nervous and jokingly reply that humans normally have the ability of perverted maniac, meaning that humans in that world are known for being quite lustful. Later, the protagonist enters the bathtub and thinks it is the perfect time for the three of them to bathe together. When the girls join him, he feels as if he is in paradise. Sherry is surprised to see Roxson undressing so casually. After some awkwardness, the situation becomes intimate in a way that cannot be shown in the anime, but it is clear that the protagonist is very satisfied. After a long time, he admires how beautiful Sherry's hair looks after using the soap she made. He asks her to sit beside him and explains that like Roxson, she must wake him up with a kiss every morning. Unable to resist, he kisses Sherry, then quickly remembers that he must respect the order with his first slave and worries that Roxson might be upset. However, she reassures him. The moment again becomes intimate, though nothing more is described. Later, while the protagonist sleeps, the two girls talk about what happened and begin to get along well as companions. The next day, the protagonist wakes up and sees Sherry with messy hair. Roxson comments that it is a beautiful day. The protagonist checks his skills, and, as expected, now has the class of perverted maniac, since he has clearly gone beyond what an ordinary human would do with two girls. He goes outside for fresh air, thinking about how human desires can reach unimaginable levels. As a self-proclaimed pervert, he decides that he will reach those heights and even surpass them, since he plans to build his own harem.